Hello. Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you for coming to the second session. I apparently didn't scare too many of you away from my last one, so that's good. Appreciate that. The okay. So I think you guys are already here. So I'm Derek Summer, owner of Spud Software. 22 years in business. I've worked with hundreds of clients. Sorry, you have to hear that for some of you guys a second time. Something I didn't say last time that I meant to say was how I measure value in presentations and things like that. If I was sitting where you're sitting versus here, and one of the things that I hope you guys get out of this is if I at least somehow give you back 40 minutes, whether it's you've learned something that saves you some time, or saves you some money by doing certain things or whatever, that hopefully the 40 minutes I spent with you is worth it for you. So anyway. Setting business goals, KPIs, key performance indicators. These are things that every company needs to have. Everyone should be utilizing. I actually was listening to a book a couple weeks ago about KPIs. There's only like 2 apparently written. But it was just invented in 1996, which really surprised me. I just figured KPIs have been around since the beginning of time. Because there are ways of measuring things. Now, where things do get a little muddy is people's definitions of KPIs. My definition, which Lyle works here, I have my own definition of a lot of things in the world that don't agree with everyone just because I don't know better. But the KPI to me is anything that's measuring, that's driving action. Okay, so if you have a measurable that's a drive action, that's a KPI in my opinion. There's metrics out there, there's reports, there's analytics, all other kind of words or whatever like that. But to me, a KPI is something that is being measured to drive action, to reach an ultimate goal. So a KPI isn't, I want to do $10 million in business. That's not a KPI, that's a goal. A KPI is the things that have to happen to reach that goal. So now a KPI itself should be very easy to read. It should be something that you walk by a TV monitor and there's graphs and charts up there, and anyone, I mean, whether it's someone's little kid or client or whatever, can look at it and make total sense of it and know what it means. So define the KPI. It is a lot of work. It's you start with your end goal and you work your way down. But what you're trying to do is determine the behavior you're trying to change or improve. Okay, so an easy example, sales is always easy to pick on because Lyle's here, and he handles it well. He's worked at Spud for 13 years. He's worked with me. So held basically every position in the company except for mine. So, you know, whenever he wants it, I'm willing. But anyway, sales is an easy one because everyone can relate to it and understand what it is. So say your example is you want to do so many calls per week. Okay, you want outbound calls so many per week. That's a KPI. So you set it up and you measure it. We'll get into more of the details, though it's not that easy, but that's the gist. So you start with a goal and you work your way backwards. An example I wrote in here is it's like training for a marathon. You don't go out and run a marathon. You run a mile one day, a couple miles the next time, a couple miles the next time. Eventually you can handle a marathon. KPI is very similar because what you're doing with a KPI is you're saying, I want to do this much in sales. And this is where I'd be looking for a chalkboard. But in a nutshell, you want to do $10 million in sales. Well, what do I got to do $10 million in sales? Well, to do that, I got to do so many sales. Well, to do this many sales, how many face-to-face meetings do I have to have? Well, to have the face-to-face meetings, how many cold calls do I have to make? How many emails do I have to do? Stuff like that. So you work your way backwards. So you figure out, this is what my end goal is. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I'm going to do to get there. Now, KPI is ever evolving. It's not, you don't define it one time. I'm going to probably say this 10 times today. But you don't just write it one time and you're done. Hello? Wow, that was weird. Okay, I'll get to that more in a second. But at the same time, when you're setting these goals, they got to be reasonable. Like this picture here, that's me, which the one time you'll see me not in an orange shirt, if anyone's ever met me more than once. But this is some of the guys from the office. We're writing on the whiteboard in our conference room. We're trying to figure out what some objectives are. Okay, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to get out of that meeting? What are we trying to get out of the company? What are we trying to do? So we're setting the goals. We're looking for the outcome. So it's got to be reasonable, though. They can't just be, Lyle, I want you to make 100 calls a day. I mean, it ain't going to happen. So now you're going to set up a KPI that's going to be frustrating and actually bad for morale and everything else in the company, which we'll get to one of those stories in a second too. Another thing is you can't just keep increasing numbers. You can't just sit there and say, okay, well, Lyle, I want you to make 10. Sorry, I keep using Lyle. Sorry. Lyle, I want you to make 10 calls a day. He starts making 10 calls a day. Great job, Lyle. Now you're going to make 15 calls a day. Oh, good job. A couple more weeks go by. Now you're making 15 calls a day. Great. I need you to make 20 calls a day. Well, there's a couple of reasons why this isn't good. One, because in using the sales example again, the more calls he's making, hopefully the more meetings he's setting up. So those more meetings are taking more time. So he has less time to make the calls. So we're increasing these numbers because we want more calls, because we want more meetings, but we're forgetting that he's having more meetings. When you have more meetings, guess what you're doing? You're writing more proposals. And depending on your business you're in, your proposals could take 5 minutes to write, or we've had some take weeks or many man hours. So anyway, you got to go through the keep changing it to what makes sense. And I'll get to that more in a second as far as increasing additional KPIs besides just making the calls. Okay, so this is a good example. This is, if you guys listened to my one earlier about your CPA, this is something that I wish I knew many years ago, and my CPA should have told me this in my opinion. But I've learned enough reading some book, and I said, what is the industry standard for a company like mine? What is the industry standard for profit percentage? Okay, because we're custom software, it's a weird thing. It's hard to find out. You can't just go ask your competitors, well, what kind of margins you work on, because you know what they'll tell you. Oh, we're like 80% margins. No. So anyway, you got to figure out what the industry standard is. So they told me what my industry standard was. Well, I compared that to ours. And ours is lower. Our profit margin is much lower. So I made that into a goal that I want to be above the industry standard profit margin. So how do I do that? We started writing up KPIs, things to measure it, to reach that goal. So